Recorded live at the center of the earth. This is Robots from Tomorrow.
Hello and welcome to Robots from Tomorrow. My name is Greg. Thanks for being here. Before we get started with today's topic, if you haven't heard the show before and you end up liking what you hear, then follow along at the following locations. RobotsFromTomorrow.com is our website and the only place where you can find all prior episodes categorized and completely free. We are also on Blue Sky at RFT Podcast, and we have a YouTube channel. These all let you get more pictures from our talk about words and pictures. And if you want to experience the show in its natural habitat, the only place to do that is, of course, MultiversityComics.com. Multiversity Comics is still the best way to stay informed about the wide world of comics. The site is updated multiple times throughout the day with all manner of news, reviews, interviews, other podcasts like Make Mine Multiversity, the DC3 Cast, and more. There is a pretty good chance every time you head over to MultiversityComics.com, you'll find something new. And something new today is another episode in our Someday Reading Project. Last time, I talked about the impact Dragon magazine had on me as a very young comics reader, showing me that comics can come in many different shapes, sizes, and textures. I compared it in a way to other folks seeing their first heavy metal magazine, with, again, much less nudity. Now, I want to carry that thread of gateway/boundary expanding comics a little further today. I talk about a title that's celebrating its 47th anniversary this very month, 2018. So, for this episode, I read the first dozen issues, or progs, as they're called, short for program. But since I can never really just stick to any assignments, I also started listening to original editor and writer Pat Mills's autobiography, audiobook, Be Pure, Be Vigilant, Behave, as well as rewatching a big chunk of the excellent Future Shock documentary on 2000 AD. So clearly, I've got Tharg on the brain as I'm talking about this. Let's see where it takes us. 2000 AD Prog 1 came out on Saturday, February 26, 1977. But it didn't quite spring forth fully formed from the head of Zeus or the aforementioned Tharg, contrary to reports saying otherwise. Nope. 2000 AD came from the ashes of editor Pat Mills's previous work at IPC Magazines, another boys' adventure comic called Action. Now, I guess technically it was still being published alongside 2000 AD for a while, but the influential period of the comic, the one that really shook things up, had come to a close some months prior. So what was it about the Action comic, and not Action Comics by the way, that made it a trailblazer? It delivered on its title, and then some. It gave readers the same type of stories they were seeing in other media, and in many cases more violent and weekly. Action drew inspiration from pop culture of the day, and angry days they were back then. Rollerball became Death Game 1999. World War II showed up in Hellman of Hammerforce, which had a principled Nazi tank commander as the protagonist. Trucker culture rolled through the pages of Action as Hell's Highway. And my personal favorite, their take on Jaws. What's scarier than a great white shark? Well, a great white shark with a harpoon in its mouth, of course. It was Jaws with a hook. It was called Hookjaw. Fantastic. Boys loved it, the establishment hated it, and Action lasted only 6 months before a poorly colored cover implying a mob of teen anarchists were about to beat up a defenseless policeman was the final straw. Public outcry went from fueling Action sales to instigating editorial changes. Plans were altered, work was censored, and after a short hiatus, the new Action showed up on newsstands to a resounding yawn from the once cheering fanbase. But all was not lost. Mills carried the spirit of Action and its in-your-face rebellious nature to the science fiction genre, where the shields of allegory and subtext gave him more breathing room, though by no means totally smooth sailing. That first prog of 2000 AD had 5 strips in it, each between 5 to 6 pages, almost twice the length of the standard Action strip, giving creators more room to work with. Those strips were Flesh. Cowboys have been sent back to the past to rustle up and harvest dinosaur meat for corporations of the future. Mach 1. John Probe is the $6 million man. Or whatever that worked out to in the exchange rate back then. Invasion! Exclamation point. Russia invades the UK. Wait, I'm sorry, excuse me. That's the Volgan Republic invades the UK, despite the appearances of the contrary. The government collapses. Margaret Thatcher is executed in public on page 2. And lorry driver Bill Savage and his shotgun emerges as a working-class resistance hero. Harlem Heroes, future sky basketball with jetpacks. And Dan Dare, a revival of the classic 50s British space hero from Eagle. And then, the very next week, Prague 2 gave us Judge Dredd, Lawman of the Future. Now, for those of you wanting to follow along at home, Rebellion doesn't have actual reprints of Pragues going back this far, but their web store does have a First Stories bundle of collections with all of this material included. $50 gets you 6 DRM-free digital trades with at least the first 24 or so Pragues worth of material between them. My one suggestion, if you partake of that, is to still read these comics anthology style rather than all of one strip and then all of another strip and then all of another strip. Because part of the pleasure of reading 2000 AD, especially this era, is that cognitive roller coaster between the strips. These were built to go together one after another, after another, after another. So why not read them that way? Having said that, begs the question, well, how do they go together? Surprisingly well, I'd say. Better than what I've been able to read of Action, certainly. Ranking the 2000 AD strips from my most to least favorite, I'd go in this order. Dredd, Harlem Heroes, Flesh and Invasion tied for third, Dan Dare, and then Mach 1. Dredd is clearly the best of this initial bunch. Even in such an embryonic form, you can already see it starting to find its footing in ways none of the other strips managed to do. Starting off with one-off stories before launching into the Robot Wars storyline in Prague 10 may have been as much of a product of editorial issues as creative decisions, but it really helped solidify Dredd as a vehicle for many types of stories instead of just one story. Now, the next 3 strips are really, really close for me. I think I dig the concept and vibe of Flesh better than Invasion or Harlem Heroes, and I'm more of a sucker for invasion/resistance stories than sports stories. Having said that, the Dave Gibbons art on Harlem Heroes puts it over the other two for me. I mean, I'm already at Gibbons mark coming into this, and don't get me wrong, the 2000 AD art is pretty solid across the board, but Gibbons feels the most ready for prime time to me in these issues. Now, I did say Invasion and Flesh were tied, but if I'm being completely honest, Flesh probably ranks higher because of that high concept and completely over-the-top execution. Flesh absolutely feels like an action idea given a sci-fi twist cranked up to 11. Cowboys harvesting dinosaurs, and, trust me, dinosaurs in turn harvesting cowboys. Flesh indeed. I first encountered Invasion's protagonist Bill Savage in Mills's 2000s-era revamp of the concept called, appropriately enough, Savage. So seeing him here in simpler form is nice, but it's one note. Invasion strikes one as closer to action and not quite tweaked enough to comfortably fit into 2000 AD. I can see Mills's logic behind reworking the genteel Dan Dare of the past into a, quote, space hyperhero, unquote, as he's called here. But while he's definitely sci-fi enough for the Progs, this just doesn't have enough, I guess, subversion to it? Subtext? I don't know, but it just didn't quite click with me. The same, and even more so with Mach 1. I never really cared for the $6 Million Man either, so this trip had a real uphill battle with me and never managed to make it to the top of my interest. Just not my cuppa, as they say. Mills talks about the reaction to 2000 AD in his book and the documentary, how he was inundated with requests to make it more like heavy metal, or, I guess, given the timing of those questions, probably metal or long. Yeah, as if he wanted to have his comic printed on toilet paper, or decided that he didn't need Mobius or Dredd to do a cover. There were certain cultural realities that kept 2000 AD where it was and how it was. And 47 years later, we can see that it's managed to still make its own mark, arguably one greater than its more high-end cousin. Though it definitely came and went over the years, ups and downs like everything else, 2000 AD never really lost that spark inherited from Action, that elusive thrill power that you can already see on display in these first dozen comics. Well, that's it for today. We'll be back next Thursday the 29th with Vince to chat about more Superman from the very time period we were just talking about. We'll be covering intercompany crossovers, the Jim Starlin lowercase c Cosmic Odyssey, Phantom Zone Terror, and more. Then it's back here the following Monday, March 4th, for a little 2000 AD surprise. Fingers crossed. So until then, stay safe, enjoy your funny books, and I'll catch you next time.